I ain't worth much, sir, but I won't quit on you. Clara May Whitfield spoke those words while standing in a freezing Montana church, her boots soaked through her hands, trembling not from cold, but from shame. 23 men had looked at her. 23 men had turned away. Then the door opened. Snow rushed in, and a man with grief carved into his face stepped forward. What happened next would prove that sometimes the ones nobody wants become the ones somebody needs most. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The church smelled of pine smoke and desperation. Clara May Whitfield stood at the front of Bitter Creek's only house of worship, her fingers numb inside her threadbare gloves. December wind howled outside, rattling the windows, reminding everyone present that winter in Montana territory wasn't something you survived, it was something you endured. Reverend Solomon Tate cleared his throat for the third time. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who'd performed this particular duty too many times. "Miss Whitfield has traveled from Boston. She's seeking honest work and a good home. Who among you will step forward?" Silence. Clara kept her chin up. She'd learned long ago that showing weakness only invited cruelty. But inside, something fragile was cracking. 23 men stood in that church. Ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, all of them needing wives, needing help, needing someone to warm their beds and raise their children. The mail-order bride agency had promised her that Montana men were desperate for women. They hadn't mentioned that desperation had limits. "She's too thin," someone muttered from the back. "Won't last the winter." "Look at them hands. Soft. City hands." "How old is she, 25-30? 28, Clara said clearly, her voice cutting through the whispers. "I'm 28 years old. I've worked in textile mills since I was 12. I can cook, clean, mend, and manage a household. I don't need pretty things or easy work. I just need a chance." More silence. Then a woman's laugh, high and sharp, like breaking ice. "Oh, how inspiring." The voice belonged to a woman in the front pew, wrapped in furs that probably cost more than Clara had earned in 5 years. "A mill worker who can mend. Surely that's worth a lifetime commitment." Clara turned to look at her. Cordelia Blackwood, wife of the wealthiest rancher in 3 counties. Even in a frontier church, some women found ways to be queens. "I'm not asking for commitment, ma'am," Clara said steadily. "I'm asking for a chance to prove my worth." "Worth?" Mrs. Blackwood's eyebrows rose. "My dear, your worth was determined the moment you stepped off that stage. These men have eyes. They can see exactly what you're worth." Heat flooded Clara's face. Not from embarrassment, from fury. The kind of fury she'd learned to swallow during 10 years of factory work, 10 years of being treated as disposable, 10 years of men like Edmund Hartley believing they owned her simply because they signed her paychecks. "Then I reckon I'll find out what I'm worth on my own," Clara said. "Thank you for your time, gentlemen. I'll trouble you no further." She stepped down from the small platform where the Reverend had positioned her like livestock at auction. Her boots clicked against the wooden floor, loud in the terrible silence. She could feel every eye on her back, pitying, dismissing, already forgetting. The church door was 15 feet away. 10, 5. She reached for the handle. "Wait!" The voice came from behind her, deep, rough, tired. The voice of a man who'd forgotten how to use it for anything but giving orders. Clara turned. He stood in the shadows near the back of the church, half hidden by a wooden pillar. She hadn't noticed him before, hadn't counted him among the 23 who'd rejected her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a coat that had seen better decades. His face was weathered, his jaw covered in stubble that said he'd stopped caring about appearances long ago. But his eyes, dark brown, almost black in the dim light, those eyes were looking at her like she was something worth seeing. "I'll take her," he said. The church erupted. "Silas Brody, you can't be serious. That man's got 4 children already. His last 2 housekeepers ran off before spring. She'll never survive out at his place." The man called Silas ignored them all. He walked forward, his boots heavy on the floor, his gaze never leaving Clara's face. When he reached her, he stopped, tipped his hat. The gesture was old-fashioned, almost courtly, completely at odds with his rough appearance. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm Silas Brody. I've got a ranch 10 miles north of here, 4 children who need tending, a house that needs managing. It's hard work and the winters are harder. But I keep my word and I'll treat you fair." Clara studied him. "Why me? Pardon. 23 men in this church. Not one of them would have me. Why you?" Something flickered in his dark eyes. Pain maybe, or recognition. "Because I know what it's like to stand somewhere while everyone decides you ain't worth their time," he said quietly. "And I know that sometimes the ones nobody wants are the ones who work the hardest, because they've got something to prove." Clara felt her throat tighten. "I've got 17 cents to my name, Mr. Brody. I've got nowhere to sleep tonight. You could be offering me anything, and I'd have to take it. You sure you want someone that desperate?" "Desperate ain't the same as weak, Miss Whitfield. I've been desperate myself, still am some days." He held out his hand. "So, you coming or not?" She looked at his hand, calloused, scarred, the hand of a man who'd worked harder than most people could imagine. Then she looked at his face, searching for the cruelty that experience had taught her to expect from men who held power over her. She found none. "I'm coming," she said, and placed her hand in his. The wagon waited outside, already loaded with supplies. A sturdy gray horse stamped impatiently in the cold breath, steaming in the frozen air. "Climb up," Silas said, offering his hand to help her onto the bench. "We need to move. Storm's coming and I want to be home before it hits." Clara settled onto the hard wooden seat, pulling her thin coat tighter around her shoulders. It was a coat meant for Boston winters, not Montana ones. Already she could feel the cold seeping through, finding every gap, every weakness. Silas climbed up beside her, gathered the reins and clicked to the horse. The wagon lurched forward, wheels crunching through the snow that had already accumulated on the main street. Behind them, faces pressed against the church windows, watching, judging, already spinning stories about the desperate woman and the broken rancher. "Let them look," Silas said as if reading her thoughts. "They'll talk no matter what we do. Might as well give them something to talk about." "Do they talk about you often?" "Some." He kept his eyes on the road ahead. "My wife died 3 years back. Folks expected me to remarry quick, get someone to help with the children. When I didn't, they started talking. Said I was touched by grief. Said I couldn't let go. Said my children were running wild." "Were they right?" "About the grief, yes. About my children." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "They ain't wild. They're just lost. Same as me." The town fell away behind them, buildings giving way to endless white prairie. The wind picked up, driving snow into their faces. "Tell me about them," Clara said. "Your children." Silas was quiet for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts. "Caleb's 13. He's the oldest. Takes everything too serious, tries to be the man of the house when he should still be a boy. He'll be the hardest to win over. He remembers his mother best. And the others. Lottie's 10. Charlotte, but everyone calls her Lottie. Quiet girl, loves her books, watches everything, says little. She's been waiting for someone to teach her what her mother would have taught her, but she won't admit it." Clara nodded, filing away each detail. "Wyatt's 7. All energy, no direction. Gets into everything, breaks half of what he touches, but he's got a good heart under all that chaos. He needs attention, and I haven't had enough to give." "And the youngest?" Something softened in Silas's expression. "Della. She just turned 4. Doesn't remember her mother much anymore. She carries a rag doll her mother made before." He stopped, his jaw tightening. "Before she got sick. Della's scared of people leaving. You need to understand that going in. She'll attach to you fast, and if you leave, it'll break something in her." "I won't leave." Silas glanced at her. "You say that now." I mean it now too. The last 2 women I hired said the same thing. First one lasted 3 weeks, said it was too isolated, too much work, too cold. Second one made it to February before she packed her things in the middle of the night and walked to town. Didn't even say goodbye to the children. Clara felt anger flare in her chest, not at Silas, but at those women. At anyone who could look at grieving children and decide their own comfort mattered more. I'm not them, she said. No. Silas agreed slowly. I don't reckon you are. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon, the horses breathing, the endless whisper of wind through snow. Clara's fingers were going numb despite her gloves, and she tucked them under her arms for warmth. Silas noticed. Without a word, he reached behind the seat and produced a heavy wool blanket, draping it over her lap. Thank you, Clara said, surprised by the gesture. Can't have you freezing before we get there. My children are expecting someone who can cook supper. Is that all they're expecting? Silas was quiet for a long moment. They're expecting someone who'll leave. That's what they've learned, that people leave. Their mother left not by choice, but she left all the same. Everyone since then has left by choice, so they'll test you, push you, see how far they have to go before you give up on them. And what should I do when they push? Push back. He glanced at her, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. But gentle, firm, but gentle. Let them know you see what they're doing and you're staying anyway. The road curved, climbing a gentle rise. When they crested it, Silas pulled the wagon to a stop. There, he said, pointing. Clara looked down into a valley sheltered by a ring of hills. She saw a main house 2 stories built solid against the weather. A barn, several outbuildings, a corral with a few horses huddled against the wind. Smoke rose from the chimney, a thin gray ribbon against the heavy white sky. It's not much, Silas said, but it's home. Something in Clara's chest loosened. It wasn't a grand estate. It wasn't the fancy house Edmund Hartley had tried to trap her in. It was a working ranch, practical and plain, exactly the kind of place where people survived by their own labor and nobody pretended to be anything they weren't. It looks like home, she said quietly. Silas looked at her strangely, as if she'd said something unexpected. Then he clicked to the horse and started down toward the valley. The front door burst open before the wagon had fully stopped. 4 faces appeared on the porch. 3 children clustering together, 1 small figure hanging back in the doorway. Clara studied them quickly, matching faces to the descriptions Silas had given her. Caleb stood at the front, tall for 13, his dark hair windblown and his expression guarded. His eyes blue like winter ice, fixed on Clara with open suspicion. Lottie hovered beside him, brown braids escaping their ribbons, a book clutched to her chest like armor. She was watching Clara with the careful attention of a child who'd learned that observation was safer than participation. Wyatt bounced on his toes, unable to stand still. His face split with curiosity and barely contained energy. He was already talking before anyone else could speak. Is that her? Is that the lady? She looks cold. Is she going to stay? Can she cook? Can she? Wyatt? Caleb's voice was sharp. Quiet. The boy subsided, but his eyes never left Clara. And in the doorway, half hidden by the frame, stood Della. 4 years old, clutching a faded rag doll, her blonde hair tangled, and her brown eyes huge with uncertainty. Silas climbed down from the wagon and reached up to help Clara. His hands were steady warm despite the cold. Children, he said, turning to face them. This is Miss Clara Whitfield. She's going to be staying with us, helping with the house, helping with you. For how long? Caleb asked immediately. For as long as she wants to stay. So she'll leave too. The boy's voice was flat dismissive. Just like the others. Clara stepped forward before Silas could respond. You're Caleb, she said. The boy blinked, surprised to be addressed directly. Yeah, so... Your father told me about you on the ride here, said you're serious, responsible. That you've been trying to fill your father's shoes and your mother's shoes all at once. Caleb's jaw tightened. Someone had to. That's true, someone did. And you stepped up when no one else could. That takes strength. Clara held his gaze. But here's the thing about carrying that much weight, eventually it breaks you. Not because you're weak, but because no one person should have to carry everything alone. What do you know about it? I know I've been carrying weight since I was 12 years old. Working in factories, taking care of myself because no one else would. Fighting to survive every single day. Clara's voice was steady. I know exactly what it costs Caleb, and I know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let someone help. The boy stared at her, his expression shifting from hostility to something more complicated. Confusion, maybe, or the first flicker of respect. That doesn't mean you're staying, he said finally. No. Clara agreed. It doesn't. Only time will prove that. So, I guess we'll both have to wait and see. Lottie stepped forward, her book still pressed to her chest. Can you read? She asked quietly. Yes, I can read. Really read. Not just a little. I've read Shakespeare and Dickens and anything else I could get my hands on. Reading was the only escape I had in the factories. Something flickered in Lottie's eyes. Hope quickly suppressed. Oh, that's good. Wyatt pushed between his siblings, unable to contain himself any longer. Can you cook? Pa's cooking is terrible. I mean, he tries, but it's really, really bad. Caleb's is worse. Lottie burned the beans last week and... Wyatt. Caleb and Lottie spoke in unison, both flushing. Clara felt a smile tugging at her lips. I can cook. I used to make bread that people lined up to buy. Real bread, not the flat kind that tastes like rocks. Real bread, soft and warm with butter melting into it. Wyatt's eyes went wide with wonder. I like you already. Wyatt, you can't just... Caleb started. Can I like her? She's nice. And she can make bread. Clara laughed a real laugh, the first one in longer than she could remember. You can reserve judgment, Wyatt. That's probably wiser. I might burn the bread. You never know. You won't, the boy said with absolute certainty. I can tell. The only one who hadn't spoken was Della. The little girl still hovered in the doorway, her rag doll dangling from one hand, her eyes fixed on Clara with an intensity that seemed too heavy for a 4-year-old. Clara crouched down, making herself smaller, less threatening. Hello, Della. I like your doll. What's her name? Della clutched the doll tighter. Sunny. That's a beautiful name. Did you choose it? A tiny headshake. Mama named her. Clara's heart clenched. Your mama had good taste in names. Della studied her for a long moment, her small face solemn. Are you going to sleep here? If your father says, I can, yes. Are you going to sleep here forever? The question hung in the cold air, weighted with everything a 4-year-old couldn't say but somehow understood. I'm going to sleep here for as long as your father will have me, Clara said carefully. I can't promise forever, nobody can promise that. But I can promise that if I ever have to leave, I'll tell you first. I won't disappear in the night. I won't leave without saying goodbye. Della considered this. Promise? Promise. The little girl nodded slowly. Then, in a movement that surprised everyone, she stepped out of the doorway and slipped her small hand into Clara's. Okay, Della said. You can come inside now. It's cold. The house was warmer than Clara had expected, heated by a large stone fireplace that dominated the main room. But warmth was relative. She could still see her breath in the corners farthest from the fire, and the windows were rimmed with frost. She surveyed the space, quickly cataloging what she saw. The main room served as kitchen dining area and living space. A large wooden table with mismatched chairs. Shelves lined with dishes pots and supplies in varying states of organization. A rocking chair near the fireplace, empty with a women's shawl still draped over its back. Clara looked away from the shawl. Some things weren't hers to touch yet. Maybe ever. "I'll show you to your room," Silas said. "It's small, but it's private. Used to be the sewing room." "That's fine. I don't need much space." They walked down a short hallway. The children followed at a distance, watching, whispering among themselves. Clara could feel their eyes on her back, measuring, judging, waiting to see what kind of person she would prove to be. Silas opened a door at the end of the hall. "Here." The room was indeed small, just enough space for a narrow bed, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a small trunk at the foot of the bed. But it had a window that looked out toward the hills, and the bed had clean sheets. "It's perfect," Clara said, and meant it. Silas nodded, hovering in the doorway. "Supper's usually at 6. The children have their chores. I'll explain those tomorrow. Tonight, just settle in. Get warm. You've had a long day." "Mr. Brody," he paused. "Thank you for stepping forward, for giving me a chance when no one else would." Something shifted in his expression. Pain, gratitude, something complicated that she couldn't quite read. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Whitfield. You haven't seen how hard it gets." "I've seen hard, Mr. Brody. This—" She gestured around her at the small room, the distant sound of children arguing, the wind howling outside. "This is just different. Different isn't the same as hard." He studied her for a moment, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe you're exactly what we needed." He left, closing the door behind him. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her whole body starting to shake now that she was finally alone. Not from cold, from the release of tension she'd been holding since she'd stepped off that stage in Bitter Creek. She'd done it. She'd found a place. Not a home, not yet, but a place where she might build one. From the main room she could hear voices. Caleb's sharp and suspicious, "She won't last. None of them do." Lottie's quieter, "Maybe she's different." Wyatt's enthusiastic, "She can make bread, Caleb, real bread." And underneath it all, Silas's low rumble, too quiet for her to make out the words. She touched the bed, the dresser, the frost-covered window. Real things. Solid things. Things that wouldn't disappear when Edmund Hartley decided he wanted them. Edmund. The thought of him hit her like cold water. He was still out there, still looking for her, still believing she belonged to him. She'd told herself that Montana was far enough, that the frontier was wild enough to swallow a woman and keep her hidden. But standing in that church today, feeling the eyes of strangers cataloging her worth, she'd realized something terrible. She wasn't hidden. She was exposed. A mail-order bride from Boston arrived in December, rejected by 23 men. That was a story. Stories traveled. Stories could be traced. If Edmund was looking, he would find her eventually. But that was a problem for another day. Today, she had a different battle to fight: 4 children who expected her to leave a rancher who'd forgotten how to hope, and a winter that was trying its best to kill them all. Clara straightened her shoulders. She'd survived Edmund Hartley's hands on her in darkened hallways. She'd survived the factory that broke women's backs and spirits. She'd survived the train ride west with nothing but 17 cents and a stubborn refusal to give up. She would survive this too. A knock on her door, small, hesitant. "Come in," Clara said. The door opened to reveal Della still clutching Sonny. The little girl stood on the threshold, looking uncertain. "I wanted to see if you were still here," Della said. "I'm still here. Sometimes people are here, and then they're not. They go away while you're sleeping." Clara's heart broke a little. She held out her hand. "Come here, sweetheart." Della crossed the small room and climbed onto the bed beside Clara. She was warm and solid, smelling of wood smoke and something sweet, honey maybe. "I'm not going to disappear while you're sleeping," Clara said gently. "When you wake up tomorrow, I'll be here. And the day after that. And the day after that. Promise? Promise." Della leaned against Clara's side, her small body relaxing. Okay. Sonny believes you. Sonny's good at knowing who to believe. Then I'm glad Sonny believes me. That means a lot. They sat together in the fading afternoon light, the wind howling outside the house creaking around them. Two strangers, one who'd lost everything, and one who'd never had anything, beginning the slow, uncertain work of becoming something more. From down the hall, Silas's voice called, "Della, where'd you go?" "I'm with Miss Clara," Della shouted back. "I'm helping her feel not alone." A pause. Then Silas appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He looked at his daughter curled against the stranger's side, at the way Della's small hand clutched Clara's sleeve. "Supper's almost ready," he said quietly. "You're welcome to join us, both of you." Clara nodded, lifting Della and settling the child on her hip as naturally as if she'd been doing it for years. "We'll be right there." Silas watched them for a moment longer. Something in his expression shifted the first crack in that wall of grief and wariness he'd built around himself. Then he nodded and walked away. Della patted Clara's cheek with one small hand. "I'm hungry." "Then let's go eat." "Will there be bread?" "Not tonight, but tomorrow I'll make some. I promise." "You promise a lot of things." Clara smiled, the first real smile she'd given since arriving in Montana. "I know, but here's the thing about promises, Della. The only way they mean anything is if you keep them. So I only promise things I can do." Della considered this with the gravity of a child who'd learned too young that adults didn't always keep their word. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll wait and see. That's all I ask." They walked out together into the warmth of the main room toward the family waiting around the table. Caleb's suspicious eyes, Lottie's careful hope, Wyatt's irrepressible enthusiasm, and Silas standing by the stove watching Clara with an expression she couldn't quite read. Outside, the storm hit with full force, snow driving against the windows, wind screaming around the corners of the house. They were trapped here now, all of them together, with no choice but to figure out how to survive each other. Clara took her seat at the table, Della refusing to let go of her hand. "Well," Silas said, his voice gruff as he served out portions of stew that looked marginally better than what Wyatt had described. "Welcome to the Brody Ranch, Miss Whitfield. I hope you're ready for the hardest winter of your life." Clara looked around the table at the faces watching her, wary, hopeful, desperate, lost. Then she picked up her spoon and took a bite of stew. "I've been getting ready for this my whole life," she said. "I just didn't know it until today." And somewhere deep in her chest, in the place where hope had been frozen solid for years, something small and warm began to thaw. The first week tested everything Clara thought she knew about survival. She woke before dawn on that second morning, her body stiff from the thin mattress, her breath visible in the frigid air of her small room. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back, the church. The rejection. Silas Brody's rough voice saying, "I'll take her." She dressed quickly in the darkness, her fingers clumsy with cold, and made her way to the kitchen. Silas was already there. He stood at the stove, struggling with the fire, cursing softly under his breath. When he heard her footsteps, he turned, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "You're up early." "So are you." "Ranch doesn't run itself, especially not in winter." He gestured at the stove. "Damn thing won't catch properly. Flu's been temperamental since October." Clara moved to his side, studying the arrangement of kindling and logs. "May I?" He stepped back, watching as she adjusted the flue, rearranged the kindling, and coaxed a small flame to life. Within minutes, the fire was burning steadily. "Where'd you learn that?" Silas asked. "Factory dormitories. 40 women sharing 3 stoves. You learn fast, or you freeze." He nodded slowly, something like respect flickering in his dark eyes. "Coffee's in the tin on the shelf. I usually just make it strong enough to wake the dead. I'll see what I can do." They worked in silence for a while, Clara preparing coffee, while Silas pulled on his coat and boots. The easy quiet between them felt strange, comfortable in a way she hadn't expected. "I'll be in the barn," he said, pausing at the door. "Cattle need tending, and one of the horses has been favoring her left leg. Children usually wake around 7. Caleb knows the morning routine." "I'll have breakfast ready." Silas hesitated, his hand on the doorframe. "Miss Whitfield." "Yes." "Yesterday in the church, what you said about standing somewhere while everyone decides you ain't worth their time." He didn't look at her. "I meant what I said. I know that feeling, and I know what it costs to keep standing anyway." Before she could respond, he was gone, the door closing behind him, letting in a blast of frozen air that made the fire sputter. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Then she shook herself and got to work. By the time the children stumbled out of their rooms, she had coffee brewing, eggs frying, and the first batch of biscuits nearly ready. The smell filled the house, warm and inviting, pushing back against the winter cold. Wyatt appeared first, his hair sticking up in all directions, his eyes going wide when he saw the stove. "You're cooking," he said, as if witnessing a miracle. "That's generally what happens in a kitchen." "But it smells good." He crept closer, peering at the biscuits through the oven window. "It smells really good." "Thank you. Set the table, please. Plates are on the shelf." Wyatt blinked, clearly unused to being given tasks so directly. But he moved to obey, pulling down plates with more enthusiasm than care. Lottie came next, already dressed, her braids neater than they'd been yesterday. She paused in the doorway, taking in the scene, Clara at the stove, Wyatt setting the table, the smell of actual food cooking. "You're still here," she said quietly. "I told you I would be." The last one said that too. She left on the third day. Clara flipped the eggs, keeping her voice steady. "I'm not her." "How do I know that?" "You don't. Not yet. But you will if you give me time." Lottie considered this, her book clutched to her chest as always. "What are you reading?" Clara asked, nodding toward the worn cover. "Jane Eyre. Ma gave it to me before—" The girl stopped, her face closing. "Before. That's one of my favorites. Jane's had a hard life, but she never loses herself, never becomes cruel even when people are cruel to her." Lottie's eyes widened slightly. "You've read it?" "3 times. I used to read it when things got bad at the factory. Reminded me that survival doesn't have to mean losing who you are." Something shifted in Lottie's expression, the first crack in her careful armor. "Maybe," she said slowly, "maybe we could talk about it sometime. About the book. I'd like that." Caleb appeared last, fully dressed, his expression already set in that guarded mask Clara was beginning to recognize. He stopped short when he saw the kitchen, his eyes narrowing. "What are you doing?" "Making breakfast. Pa usually does that." "Your father's in the barn. I thought I'd help." Clara began transferring eggs onto plates. "Sit down. Food's ready." Caleb didn't move. "We don't need your help." "Caleb." Clara set down the pan and turned to face him. "I know you don't trust me. I know you're waiting for me to leave just like everyone else left. And I know that every morning I'm still here it feels more dangerous because the longer I stay, the more it'll hurt when I go." The boy's face went pale. "I didn't. But here's the thing." Clara crossed to him, stopping close enough to see the fear beneath his anger. "I'm not planning to go, and every day I'm here I'm going to do my job. Make meals, clean the house, help where I can. You can be angry about it, or you can accept it and let me make your life a little easier. Either way, I'm staying." Caleb stared at her, his jaw working. For a moment, Clara thought he might yell, might storm out, might do any of the things a 13-year-old boy did when he felt cornered. Instead, he sat down at the table. "The biscuits better be good," he muttered. "They're excellent," Clara said calmly. "But you can judge for yourself." Della wandered in just as Clara was serving Sunny, dragging along the floor behind her. The little girl's face lit up when she saw Clara. "You're still here?" "Still here. Forever. Let's start with today, and see how it goes." Della climbed into her chair, then patted the seat beside her. "Sit next to me." "I need to finish cooking." "After." "Sit next to me after." Clara smiled, despite herself. "All right, after." The door opened, bringing cold air, and Silas stomping snow from his boots. He stopped when he saw the table. 4 children eating, the kitchen warm, and smelling of fresh food, everything running smoothly. "You've been busy?" he said. "I told you I could cook." Silas hung up his coat and moved to the table, taking his place at the head. He picked up a biscuit, examined it, took a bite. His eyebrows rose. "These are edible," Clara offered. "Better than edible. These are—" He took another bite, chewing slowly. "Where'd you learn to cook like this?" "Same place I learned everything else. Necessity. When you grow up without much, you learn to make the most of what you have." Wyatt was already on his 3rd biscuit. "Can you make these every day?" "If we have the supplies." "Pa, we need supplies. We need so many supplies. We need—" "Wyatt!" Silas's voice carried warning, but his eyes were warm. "One breakfast at a time." The meal continued in something approaching peace. Clara ate standing by the stove, watching the family dynamics play out. Caleb maintained his silence, but he ate everything on his plate. Lottie kept glancing at Clara, then away, as if afraid to look too long. Wyatt talked enough for everyone, and Della kept twisting around to make sure Clara was still there. When the plates were empty, Silas stood. "Caleb, Wyatt, you're with me. Cattle won't tend themselves." "But Pa—" Wyatt started. "No arguments. Get your coats." The boys left reluctantly, Wyatt casting longing glances at the remaining biscuits. Clara wrapped 2 in a cloth and pressed them into his hands as he passed. "For later," she whispered. His face split into a grin. "You're the best. Remember that when your brother's being difficult." Silas paused at the door, looking back at her. "You'll be all right with the girls. We'll manage." He nodded once, then followed his sons into the winter morning. Clara turned to find Lottie and Della watching her expectantly. "Well," she said, "I suppose we should clean up." The morning passed faster than Clara expected. She washed dishes while Lottie dried the girls' movements, careful, precise, as if afraid of breaking something. Della sat at the table, having an elaborate tea party with Sunny and 3 imaginary friends. "She does that a lot," Lottie said quietly, nodding toward her sister. "The pretend friends. Started after Ma died. It's how some children process grief, creating worlds they can control when the real world feels too scary." Lottie glanced at her. "How do you know that?" "I did something similar. When I was young and things were hard, I used to pretend I had a mother who would come back for me. Someone who'd take me away from the factory, give me a real home." Clara handed over another plate. "I was older than Della before I stopped believing she might actually come." "Did she come back, I mean?" "No. She died before I was born, but the pretending it helped for a while. Gave me somewhere to go when reality was too much." Lottie was quiet for a moment. "Ma used to say that's what books were for, places to go when you needed to escape." "Your ma sounds like she was very wise." "She was." Lottie's voice cracked slightly. "She was the wisest person I ever knew. And she got sick and then she was gone, and nothing made sense anymore." Clara set down the dish she was washing and turned to face the girl fully. "Lottie, can I tell you something?" The girl nodded, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Losing someone you love, it never makes sense. It's not supposed to. And anyone who tells you it will get easier is lying. It doesn't get easier. It just gets different. You learn to carry it differently, the weight. Some days it's heavier than others. But it never goes away completely." "Then what's the point?" Lottie's voice was barely a whisper. "What's the point of loving anyone if it hurts this much when they're gone?" Clara crouched down to meet the girl's eyes. The point is that the love doesn't go away either. Your ma is gone, but the love she gave you, that's still here. It's in the book she gave you. In the memories you carry. In the way you take care of Della, the way you watch over your brothers, even when they don't notice. That love is still alive, Lottie. It always will be. A tear slipped down Lottie's cheek. She brushed it away, quickly embarrassed. Ma used to say something like that, she admitted. She said love was like planting seeds. Even when the gardener's gone, the flowers keep blooming. She was right. Della looked up from her tea party, her small face concerned. Lottie, why are you crying? I'm okay, Della. Are you sad about Mama? Lottie's breath caught. A little, yes. Della climbed down from her chair and walked over to her sister, wrapping small arms around Lottie's waist. It's okay to be sad. Sonny says so. Sonny says Mama would understand. Lottie hugged her sister back, her tears flowing freely now. Clara watched them, her own throat tight, and thought about all the ways grief could break a family and all the ways love could hold it together. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Clara woke early, started the fire, made breakfast. Silas went to tend the livestock while the children ate. Caleb and Wyatt helped their father during the day. Lottie and Della stayed with Clara, learning the household tasks their mother had never had time to teach them. Each day Clara earned a little more ground. With Lottie, it was books. They started reading Jane Eyre together in the evenings, Clara helping with the harder words, discussing the story in the quiet moments between chores. Lottie began to thaw her careful silence, giving way to actual conversation. With Della, it was simpler. The little girl had adopted Clara with the fierce possessiveness of a child who'd decided something belonged to her. She followed Clara everywhere, helped with everything, and fell asleep each night with her hand wrapped in Clara's. With Wyatt, it was food. The boy was a bottomless pit of hunger and enthusiasm, and Clara's cooking became the way to his heart. He started calling her Miss Clara instead of the new lady, and began volunteering for kitchen duties just to be near the stove. With Caleb. Caleb was harder. The boy maintained his distance, speaking to Clara only when necessary, watching her with those suspicious eyes that saw too much. He was waiting, Clara knew. Waiting for her to slip, to give up, to prove him right about what he expected. She didn't slip. On the 8th day, a blizzard hit. The snow came down so thick and fast that Silas barely made it back from the barn, ice crusting his eyebrows, his face raw from the wind. We're trapped, he announced, stomping snow onto the floor. Storm like this could be 2-3 days before we can dig out. Wyatt looked terrified. Lottie pulled her book closer. Even Della seemed to understand, her small face solemn. But Caleb's expression shifted. Not fear exactly. Something darker. Like the storm when Ma... He started, then stopped. The room went silent. Yes, Silas said quietly. Like that storm. But we're more prepared now. We have enough food, enough firewood. We'll be fine. Caleb's jaw tightened. You said that then too. Caleb. You said we'd be fine, and then Ma got sick, and then she... The boy's voice cracked. He turned and disappeared down the hallway, his door slamming behind him. Della began to cry, soft and frightened. Lottie gathered her sister close, her own face pale. Wyatt stood frozen, looking between his father and the empty hallway. I should... Silas started toward his son's room. Let me, Clara said. He stopped, surprised. You don't have to. I know, but let me try. Silas hesitated, conflict clear in his expression. This was his son, his responsibility, his failure he still carried from 3 years ago. But something in Clara's face must have reached him, because he nodded slowly. If he tells you to leave, respect that. I will. Clara walked down the hallway, past her own small room, to the door at the end where Caleb had retreated. She knocked softly. Go away. It's Miss Clara. Silence. I'm not your father, Caleb. I'm not going to try to fix this or make it better. I just thought you might want some company. More silence. Then grudgingly, "Fine." She opened the door. Caleb sat on his bed, his back against the wall, his knees drawn up to his chest. He looked younger than 13, in that moment looked like the child he'd stopped letting himself be. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, leaving distance between them. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to." "Then why are you here?" "Because nobody should sit alone with this kind of hurt." Caleb's jaw tightened. "What do you know about it?" "I know what it's like to lose someone and feel like the world should have stopped, but it didn't. I know what it's like to be angry at everyone who's still alive when the person you loved isn't. And I know what it's like to carry guilt that isn't yours." His head snapped toward her. "I don't. You think it's your fault. Something you did or didn't do. Something you should have noticed. Maybe you think if you'd been better, tried harder, prayed more, she would have lived." Clara kept her voice gentle, steady. "That's not guilt you earned, Caleb. That's grief lying to you." The boy's face crumpled just for a moment before he forced it back into that hard mask. "You don't know anything about it. I know that 3 years ago your mother got sick during a storm like this one. I know your father couldn't get help, couldn't save her, couldn't do anything but watch her slip away. And I know that ever since you've been trying to control everything around you, because if you're in control, nothing bad can happen. No one else can die." Caleb stared at her, his breathing ragged. How do you—" "Because that's what I did too. After my mother died, after I ended up in the factory, I tried to control everything, every detail, every moment. I thought if I was perfect enough, careful enough, I could keep anything bad from happening again." Clara shook her head. "It doesn't work. Bad things happen anyway. All that control does is exhaust you. So what am I supposed to do?" The words burst out of him raw and desperate. "Just let things happen. Just accept that people die, and there's nothing I can do. No, you fight for the people you love. You do everything you can. But when something's beyond your control, you have to forgive yourself for not being able to stop it." She reached out carefully and covered his hand with hers. "Your mother's death wasn't your fault, Caleb. It wasn't anyone's fault. Sickness doesn't care about fault." Tears were streaming down his face now, the first tears he'd probably cried in years. "I miss her," he whispered. "I miss her so much, and everyone keeps trying to replace her, and I just want... "You want her back." He nodded, unable to speak. "I know, sweetheart. I know." Clara squeezed his hand. "And I'm not trying to replace her. No one could do that. She was your mother, and she loved you, and that can't be replaced. But maybe there's room for something new alongside what you lost. Not instead of, alongside." Caleb was quiet for a long time, his tears slowly subsiding. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "The others, the women Pa hired before you, they tried to act like Ma. Used her recipes, wore her apron, tried to do everything exactly like she did. It made me so angry. Like they were erasing her. I won't do that. I'll make my own recipes, find my own way. And if I do something that reminds you too much of her, tell me. I'll try something different." He looked at her, then really looked at her, the hostility finally fading from his eyes. "Why do you care? We're nothing to you." "You're not nothing. You're 4 children who need someone to care about them. That's not nothing, Caleb. That's everything." He wiped his face with his sleeve, embarrassed by his tears. "You're different," he said slowly, "than the others. I keep telling you that. Maybe I'm starting to believe it." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't acceptance, but it was a crack in the wall, and Clara would take what she could get. They sat together in silence, while the storm raged outside, 2 people who understood loss learning to share the weight of it. The blizzard lasted 3 days. By the end of it, something had shifted in the household. Caleb no longer watched Clara with suspicion. He watched her with something closer to curiosity. He started helping with dinner preparation, standing beside her at the stove, asking questions about techniques and ingredients. "Ma used to add rosemary to the stew," he said one evening, his voice carefully casual. "Would you like me to try that?" He hesitated, then nodded. Clara added rosemary. The stew was better for it. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. Silas and Caleb spent hours digging out paths to the barn and the well, while Clara kept the fire burning and the food coming. When they finally stumbled inside, exhausted and frozen, Clara had hot soup waiting, fresh bread cooling on the counter, and the fire blazing high. Silas stopped in the doorway, snow melting in his hair, his face wind-raw and weary. He looked at the warm kitchen, at his children gathered safely around the table, at Clara stirring soup as if she'd been doing it her whole life. "What?" Clara asked, catching his expression. "Nothing, just—" He shook his head. "It's good to come home to this, that's all." Something warm bloomed in Clara's chest. It's good to have a home to make. That night, after the children were in bed, Silas stayed at the kitchen table while Clara finished cleaning up. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the walls. "I need to go to town," he said abruptly. "Supplies are getting low, and I need to check on a few things. Will you be all right here with the children?" "Of course." "Caleb can handle the basic chores, and Lottie knows the routine. I'll try to be back before nightfall." "Take your time. We'll be fine." Silas nodded, but he didn't move. He sat there watching her wipe down the counter, his expression thoughtful. "Miss Whitfield." "Yes." "That first day in the church, why did you say you weren't worth much?" Clara's hand stilled. "Because that's what I believed." "And now?" She turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "Now I'm starting to think maybe worth isn't something other people give you. Maybe it's something you prove. To yourself, mostly." "You've proven plenty." "Not yet, but I'm working on it." He stood slowly moving toward the hallway, then paused. "My wife Josie, she would have liked you. She had the same stubbornness, the same refusal to quit." "That's the best compliment you could give me." "It's not a compliment. It's the truth." He met her eyes. "I'm glad I stepped forward that day, Miss Whitfield. I'm glad I said I'd take you." "So am I." He nodded once, then disappeared down the hall. Clara stood alone in the kitchen, her heart beating too fast, her thoughts tangled in ways she didn't want to examine too closely. This was supposed to be a practical arrangement. Shelter and work, nothing more. But as she banked the fire and made her way to her small room, she couldn't help noticing that practical was getting harder to maintain. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered that Edmund Hartley was still out there, still looking, still believing she belonged to him. Clara closed her eyes and pushed the thought away. Tomorrow she would keep proving herself. Tomorrow she would keep earning her place in this family. Tomorrow she would keep building something worth protecting. And if Edmund came when Edmund came, she would be ready. She would not run again. Silas returned from town 3 days later with supplies news and a troubled expression that Clara noticed the moment he walked through the door. "Something wrong?" she asked, helping him unload sacks of flour and sugar. "Town's buzzing about the Christmas social. 2 weeks out. Everyone's expected to attend." He set down a crate of canned goods with more force than necessary. "Including us. And that bothers you." "What bothers me is the way folks talk." He straightened, meeting her eyes. "Word's gotten around about you being here. Some of it kind. Most of it not." Clara had expected this. Small towns survived on gossip, and a mail-order bride living with a widower and his 4 children was exactly the kind of story that fed hungry tongues. "What are they saying?" "Does it matter?" "It might." Silas pulled off his gloves, his jaw tight. "They're saying I bought myself a servant. That you're either desperate or foolish. That Cordelia Blackwood's been telling anyone who will listen about the auction about how no decent man would have you." The words stung. But Clara had been stung before. "And what do you say?" "I say they can go to hell." Despite everything, Clara felt a smile tugging at her lips. "That's very direct." "I'm a direct man." He moved to hang up his coat, his back to her. "You don't have to come. To the social. I can make excuses." "No, Jen." He turned surprised. "If I hide, they win. If I let them drive me away from public life, I might as well have stayed in Boston." Clara lifted her chin. "I'll go. I'll hold my head up, and I'll prove that their opinions don't define me." Silas studied her for a long moment. "You're something else, Miss Whitfield." "Clara. After everything we've been through, I think you can call me Clara." Something shifted in his expression. Something warm and dangerous that Clara didn't want to examine too closely. "Clara," he repeated, as if testing the weight of it. "All right then. Clara it is." The days leading up to the Christmas social passed quickly. Clara threw herself into preparations, baking extra bread to bring, helping Lottie sew a new ribbon for her dress, teaching Della a simple Christmas carol to sing. Caleb remained her most complicated project. The boy had thawed considerably since the blizzard, but he still held parts of himself back, still watched Clara with eyes that expected disappointment. "You nervous about the social?" he asked one evening, finding her alone in the kitchen. "A little. Are you?" "I hate those things, everyone staring at us, whispering about Ma." He leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "It's worse now that you're here. More to whisper about." "I'm sorry. Don't be. It's not your fault people are cruel." He was quiet for a moment. "Miss Clara." "Yes. If people say things, at the social, bad things about you or about Pa, I want you to know I'll—" He stopped, struggling with words that didn't come easily. "I won't let them, that's all." Clara's heart swelled. "Thank you, Caleb. That means more than you know." "Yeah, well." He pushed off the counter, embarrassed. "Somebody's got to look out for this family. Seems like there's more than one somebody doing that now." He almost smiled. Almost. The morning of the social dawned clear and cold. Clara dressed in her best dress, a deep green wool that Martha, the general store owner's wife, had helped her purchase on credit. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and fit well, and that would have to be enough. Della insisted on wearing her princess dress, a slightly too small frock that had been Lottie's. Lottie had managed to tame her braids into something approaching elegance. Wyatt complained about his starched collar until Silas threatened to leave him home. And Caleb stood by the wagon in his Sunday best, looking for all the world like a young man instead of a boy. "Ready?" Silas asked, helping Clara onto the wagon bench. "As I'll ever be." The ride to town felt longer than usual, weighted with anticipation. Clara sat beside Silas, achingly aware of the warmth of his arm pressed against hers in the cramped space. Behind them, the children chattered nervously, all except Caleb, who sat in watchful silence. Bitter Creek's town hall was already crowded when they arrived. Wagons lined the street, horses tied to every post, families streaming through the doors in their holiday finest. Clara stepped down from the wagon and felt eyes turn toward her immediately. She straightened her shoulders and walked inside. The hall had been decorated for Christmas pine boughs hung from the rafters. Candles flickered on every surface, and a massive tree stood in the corner, adorned with handmade ornaments. It was beautiful, and Clara might have appreciated it if she hadn't been so acutely aware of the whispers following her every step. "There she is, the leftover bride. Can you imagine standing in that church while everyone—" Silas Brody must have lost his mind. Clara kept walking her hand, finding Della's squeezing gently. The little girl squeezed back. "Miss Whitfield." The voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and commanding. Clara turned to find Cordelia Blackwood bearing down on her, resplendent in burgundy silk that probably cost more than Clara would earn in a year. Several other well-dressed women flanked her, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. "Mrs. Blackwood," Clara replied evenly. "How lovely to see you." Is it? I imagine social gatherings must be somewhat uncomfortable for you given your circumstances. Cordelia's smile was poison wrapped in politeness. Tell me, how are you finding life on the Brody Ranch? Quite a step down from whatever you left behind in Boston, I'd imagine. Actually, it's quite a step up. Cordelia's smile flickered. I beg your pardon. In Boston, I worked 16-hour days in a factory for pennies. I slept in a dormitory with 40 other women. I had no family, no security, no future. Clara kept her voice calm, conversational, as if discussing the weather. Here I have honest work, a roof over my head, and 4 children who need me. So yes, Mrs. Blackwood, it's a step up. The women around Cordelia shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the response they'd expected. The shame, the stammering, the tears. How inspiring, Cordelia said, recovering quickly. A factory girl who's grateful for scraps. I'm sure Silas appreciates your low standards. What Silas appreciates, a voice said from behind Clara, is someone who works hard and treats my children with kindness, which is more than I can say for most folks around here. Silas stepped up beside Clara, his hand coming to rest at the small of her back. The gesture was subtle, but unmistakable, protective, proprietary. Silas. Cordelia's tone shifted, became sweeter. I was just getting to know your new employee. She's not my employee. She's part of my household. Silas's voice was flat, dangerous. And if you've got something to say about her, you can say it to me. I'm merely concerned for your welfare, and your children's. Bringing a stranger into your home. Clara isn't a stranger. Not anymore. Silas's hand pressed more firmly against Clara's back. She's proven herself 10 times over. She's earned her place, and anyone who insults her insults me. The hall had gone quiet around them. People were watching openly now, abandoning any pretense of discretion. Cordelia's face had gone red, her composure cracking. Well, I can see you've been thoroughly convinced of her virtues. I've been convinced by her actions, which is more than I can say for words from people who've never worked a hard day in their lives. Silas nodded curtly. Now, if you'll excuse us, I promised my children some punch. He guided Clara away, his hand never leaving her back. Behind them, Clara could hear the eruption of whispers, but she didn't care. Her heart was pounding, her skin warm where Silas touched her. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, I did. It'll make things harder for you, publicly defending me like that. I don't care. He stopped, turning to face her. Listen to me, Clara. Those people, their opinions don't matter. What matters is what happens in our home. What matters is that my children are happier than they've been in years. What matters is that you've given us something we'd forgotten we could have. What's that? Hope. His voice was rough, almost angry. You've given us hope, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take that away. Clara didn't know what to say. She stood there looking up at this man who'd stepped forward when everyone else had turned away, and felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd kept locked tight for years. Pa! Wyatt's voice shattered the moment. They've got cookies. Big ones with sugar on top. Can I have one? Can I have 3? Silas stepped back, the intensity fading from his expression. 1, maybe 2, if you behave. I'll behave so good. The boy raced off toward the refreshment table, and the strange tension between Clara and Silas dissipated into the normal chaos of managing children. But something had changed. Clara felt it in the way Silas's eyes kept finding hers across the crowded room, in the way his hand had lingered at her back, in the way he'd said her name Clara like it meant something more than just letters strung together. Dangerous thoughts. Practical arrangements didn't include feelings like these, but as the evening wore on, practical became harder and harder to remember. The music started near 8 o'clock, a fiddle and guitar playing folk tunes that set feet tapping throughout the hall. Children ran in circles, couples took to the dancing area, and even the most reserved ranchers could be seen swaying along. Della tugged at Clara's hand. "Dance with me! Dance with me!" Clara laughed and lifted the little girl, spinning her in circles until they were both dizzy. Wyatt demanded his turn next, then Lottie, who moved with unexpected grace. Even Caleb allowed himself to be pulled into a clumsy sort of jig that left him red-faced, but grinning. Then the music changed, slower, more intimate. "Partner dance," the fiddler called. "Grab your sweetheart and hold him close." Clara started to retreat to the edge of the room, but a hand caught her elbow. "Dance with me." Silas's voice was low, almost uncertain. "If you're willing." She should say no. This was exactly the kind of thing that would feed the gossips, confirm their suspicions, blur the lines of their practical arrangement beyond recognition. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I'm willing." He led her onto the floor, one hand at her waist, the other clasping hers. They were close, closer than they'd ever been, and Clara could feel the heat of him through her dress, could smell wood smoke and leather, and something underneath that was just Silas. "I'm not much of a dancer," he admitted. "Neither am I." "Then we'll stumble through together." They moved slowly, finding a rhythm that was more shuffle than waltz. Around them, other couples glided with practiced ease, but Clara barely noticed. Her whole world had narrowed to this Silas's hand warm on her back, his eyes locked on hers, the impossible intimacy of moving together in a room full of people. "Clara." His voice was rough. "Yes. These past weeks, having you here. It's been—" He trailed off, struggling. "It's been what? It's been the first time I've felt like I could breathe since Josie died." The words came out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back for too long. "I didn't expect that. Didn't want it at first. Felt like betrayal letting someone else into the space she left. And now I think maybe she'd understand. Maybe she'd want me to stop just surviving and start living again." He pulled her slightly closer, their bodies almost touching. "You make me want to live again, Clara. I don't know what to do with that." Clara's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could feel it. "I don't know either," she admitted. "This wasn't supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to." "I know." His thumb traced a small circle on her back, the gesture somehow more intimate than a kiss. "But here we are." "Here we are?" The song ended. They stood there for a moment, neither willing to step apart, before the reality of their surroundings crashed back in. People were watching. Children were calling. The world beyond their small circle continued to exist. Silas released her slowly, his hand lingering on hers before falling away. "We should check on the children," he said. "Yes, we should." Neither of them moved. "Papa!" Wyatt's voice cut through the moment, high and urgent. "There's a man asking about Miss Clara, a fancy man from the east." Clara's blood turned to ice. She spun toward the entrance and saw him standing there. Edmund Hartley, in a coat that cost more than most people earned in a year, his eyes scanning the crowd with predatory patience. When those eyes found her, his lips curved into a smile that made her stomach turn. "There you are, Mara." Edmund's voice carried across the suddenly quiet hall. He'd always called her Mara, a corruption of her name that she hated. "You've led me quite a chase." Clara couldn't move. 3 months. She'd had 3 months of peace, 3 months of building something new, and now here he was, poisoning it all with his presence. Silas stepped in front of her, blocking Edmund's view. "Who the hell are you?" "Edmund Hartley, Boston." Edmund moved closer, his movements casual, confident, a man who'd never been denied anything he wanted. "And you must be the rancher who's been housing my property." "Your property?" Silas's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Clara worked for me. Left rather abruptly, actually. Stole some things on our way out. I've come to collect what's mine. I didn't steal anything. Clara forced the words past the terror closing her throat. I took what was mine and left. The dress you wore, I bought it. The shoes on your feet, mine as well. And the debt you incurred during your employment room board training that certainly hasn't been repaid. Edmund's smile widened. I'm a reasonable man. Come back to Boston with me, work off what you owe, and we'll call it settled. She's not going anywhere with you. Silas hadn't moved his body a barrier between Clara and her nightmare. And I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. This is a private matter between myself and my former employee. There's nothing private about a man stalking a woman across the country. There's nothing private about making up debts to force someone into servitude. Silas took a step forward, and something in his posture made Edmund take a step back. I know men like you. I've seen what you do to people who can't fight back. But Clara's not alone anymore. She's got a home. She's got family. And if you want to take her, you'll have to go through me. Edmund's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury beneath. You don't know what you're involving yourself in. I know enough. The hall had gone completely silent. Every eye was fixed on the confrontation, every ear straining to catch every word. This was scandal of the highest order entertainment that would fuel gossip for months. Clara stepped out from behind Silas. Her legs trembled, but her voice held steady. I left your employment because you made it clear that employment wasn't all you wanted from me. When I refused, you threatened to destroy my reputation, make sure I could never work again. So I ran. She faced Edmund directly, drawing strength from Silas's solid presence beside her. You don't own me. You never did. And whatever story you've invented about debts and theft, these people know me now. They've seen who I am. Your lies won't work here. They don't know you at all. Edmund's voice had gone silky dangerous. They know the version of you that's been playing house for a few weeks. They don't know what you really are. And what am I? A woman who rises above her station. A woman who takes what isn't hers. A woman who needs to be reminded of her place. He smiled. I've taught that lesson before. I can teach it again. Silas moved so fast Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her. The next, he had Edmund by the collar, his fist cocked back. You threaten her again, Silas said quietly, and I'll break your jaw. That's not a warning. That's a promise. Unhand me. Edmund's composure had finally cracked, his face flushing with fury and fear. I'll have you arrested, You'll leave. This new voice came from near the entrance. Deputy Marshal Josiah Pike pushing through the crowd with purpose. Right now, tonight, and you won't come back. On what authority? On the authority of me being tired of your kind showing up and causing trouble. Pike stopped beside Silas, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. I've sent telegrams, Mr. Hartley. Boston police have been looking for a man matching your description in connection with several complaints from former female employees. Seems you have a pattern. Edmund's face went pale. Those are baseless accusations. Maybe, maybe not. But I figure if I hold you here while they sort it out, we'll find the truth eventually. Pike smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Or you can leave tonight. Get on the first stagecoach out and never show your face in Montana again. Your choice. The silence stretched. Clara watched Edmund calculate, watched the fury war with self-preservation behind his eyes. This isn't over, Edmund said, finally shaking free of Silas's grip. You'll regret this, Mara. All of you will. It is over, Clara said quietly. You just haven't accepted it yet. Edmund stared at her for a long moment, a look of pure hatred that made her skin crawl. Then he turned and walked out into the night, the door slamming behind him. Clara's legs gave out. Silas caught her before she hit the floor, his arms wrapping around her, holding her up when she couldn't hold herself. It's all right, he murmured against her hair. It's all right. He's gone. You're safe. He'll come back, she whispered. He always comes back. Then we'll be ready. Together. Silas pulled back to look at her face, his hands cradling her cheeks. You're not alone, Clara. Whatever comes, you're not alone. Around them, the crowd began to murmur, recover from the spectacle they'd just witnessed. Clara was dimly aware of Caleb gathering his younger siblings, of Martha, pushing through the crowd to check on her, of Cordelia Blackwood, standing white-faced near the wall for once, without anything to say. But mostly, she was aware of Silas, his hands on her face, his eyes locked on hers, his promise hanging in the air between them. Not alone. She'd been alone her whole life, had learned to expect nothing else. But here now, with this man and his children and the home they were building together, maybe alone wasn't her future anymore. Take me home, she said. Silas nodded and helped her to the wagon. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. The children huddled together in the wagon bed, shaken by the confrontation they'd witnessed. Clara sat pressed against Silas's side, no longer caring what anyone thought about the closeness. When they finally pulled up to the house, Caleb was the first to speak. That man, the one from Boston, he's the reason you left, isn't he? The reason you came all the way out here? Yes. And he followed you, tracked you across the whole country? Yes. Caleb's jaw tightened, his expression shifting into something fierce and protective, a look Clara had only ever seen on Silas's face before. Then he's an idiot, the boy said flatly. Because he's not getting you. You're ours now, and we don't let go of what's ours. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Caleb. Come on. He was already climbing out of the wagon, helping his siblings down. It's cold and Della's falling asleep. We should get inside. Silas helped Clara down, his hands lingering at her waist. He's right, you know. What he said. You're ours now. Is that what I am? If you want to be. His voice was rough, uncertain. If you'll have us. All of us. Not as an arrangement anymore, but as family. Clara looked at him. This man who'd stepped forward when no one else would, who'd defended her against gossip and protected her from her past, who'd let her into his home and his children's hearts, and impossibly into his own. I want to be, she said. More than anything, I want to be. Silas kissed her forehead, soft and reverent, a promise more than a passion. Then welcome home, Clara, for good this time. They walked inside together, into the warmth and light, into the family waiting for them. But outside in the frozen darkness, Edmund Hartley sat in his rented sleigh, watching the ranch from the ridge above. He had been humiliated. He had been threatened. He had been run out of town like a common criminal. And Edmund Hartley did not forget. He did not forgive. Clara Whitfield would learn that lesson soon enough. They all would. 3 days passed without incident. Clara tried to convince herself that Edmund had left, that the humiliation at the social had been enough to drive him back to Boston where he belonged. But she knew better. She'd seen his face when he walked out. Men like Edmund didn't retreat, they regrouped. She said nothing to the children about her fears. They'd been shaken enough by the confrontation, and Christmas was approaching. They deserved joy, not more worry. But Silas knew. He saw it in the way she checked the locks twice before bed, in the way she startled at unexpected sounds in the shadows that haunted her eyes, even when she smiled. He's still out there, she admitted one night after the children were asleep. They sat at the kitchen table, the fire burning low, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between them. I know. He won't give up, not until he's made me pay for defying him. Then we stay ready. Silas reached across the table, covering her hand with his. I've told Josiah to keep eyes open, warned the neighbors to watch for strangers. If he tries anything... When he tries something... Silas's jaw tightened. When he tries something, we'll be prepared. Clara turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. The gesture had become natural between them. These small touches, these quiet intimacies that had nothing to do with their original arrangement and everything to do with what was growing in its place. I don't want to bring danger to your family, she said quietly. If something happened to the children because of me, nothing's going to happen to them. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise that whatever comes, we face it together. He squeezed her hand. You're not running again, Clara. Not from him, not from us. This is your home now. We protect what's ours. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But in the darkness of her small room that night, listening to the wind howl outside, she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. Christmas Eve dawned cold and quiet. Clara had been baking for days, cookies and pies and fresh bread enough to feed an army. The children had decorated the house with pine boughs and handmade ornaments, their excitement building toward the holiday with an intensity that warmed her heart. Do you think it'll snow more? Wyatt asked, pressing his nose against the window. I want enough snow for a fort, a big one. I think you've got plenty already. Clara laughed, pulling him back from the frosted glass. Now come help me with these cookies. The morning passed in pleasant chaos. Caleb helped Silas with the livestock, while Clara and the younger children finished preparations. Lottie read Christmas stories aloud, her voice carrying through the warm kitchen. Della practiced, her carol determined to sing it perfectly for everyone tonight. By afternoon, the sky had turned the color of iron. Silas came in from the barn, his expression troubled. Storm's coming. Big one from the look of it. How big? Big enough that I want everyone inside by dark. I need to check the far pasture, make sure the cattle are secure. Should take an hour, maybe two. I'll go with you, Caleb said immediately. No. Stay here. Keep the fire going, watch your siblings. Silas pulled on his heaviest coat. If I'm not back by nightfall, don't come looking. I know this land. I'll find shelter if I need to. Clara followed him to the door. Be careful. He turned, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Really kiss her, not just the gentle forehead touches that had become their habit. But the children were watching, and propriety still held some sway. I'll be back, he said. Keep them safe. Then he was gone, disappearing into the gray afternoon on horseback. The first hour passed slowly. Clara kept the children busy with games and stories, trying not to check the window every 5 minutes. The wind picked up as afternoon faded toward evening, rattling the shutters, moaning through gaps in the walls. By the time darkness fell, the storm had arrived in full force, and Silas hadn't returned. Where's Pa? Wyatt's voice was small, worried. He said an hour. The storm probably slowed him down, Clara said, keeping her voice steady. He knows what he's doing. But Caleb met her eyes across the room, and she saw her own fear reflected there. I should go look for him, the boy said. No, your father was clear. We stay here. But if he's hurt? Then going out in this storm will just mean 2 people lost instead of 1. Clara crossed to him, gripping his shoulders. I know it's hard. I know you want to help. But the best thing we can do right now is keep this house safe and warm so he has somewhere to come back to. Caleb's jaw worked, frustration and fear warring on his young face. But finally he nodded. The hours crawled past. Clara tried to maintain normalcy. She served dinner, helped Della practice her carol read stories until her voice grew hoarse. But the tension was suffocating, every gust of wind making them all jump, every creak of the house sounding like footsteps that never materialized. At 9 o'clock, Della fell asleep in Clara's lap, exhausted by worry and excitement in equal measure. Clara carried her to bed, tucking the blankets tight around her small body. Is Pa going to be okay? Lottie whispered from her own bed. Your father is the strongest man I know. He'll be fine. Promise? Clara hesitated. She'd promised so many things to these children. Some she'd been able to keep. But this wasn't hers to promise. I believe he'll be fine, she said carefully. And I'll stay awake until he's home. If anything happens, I'll wake you. It wasn't a promise, but it was the truth, and Lottie seemed to accept it. Clara returned to the main room to find Caleb and Wyatt still waiting, neither willing to sleep while their father was missing. "You should rest," she told them. "Can't," Caleb said. "Won't," Wyatt added, though his eyelids were heavy. Clara didn't argue. Instead, she sat down between them on the old sofa, an arm around each boy, and they waited together while the storm raged outside. Wyatt fell asleep first, slumping against her side, his breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of childhood slumber. Caleb fought longer, but eventually exhaustion claimed him too, his head dropping onto her shoulder. Clara sat alone with her fear staring at the door, willing it to open. Midnight came and went, then 1 o'clock, then 2. At 2:30 in the morning, the door burst open. Clara was on her feet instantly, heart pounding, as Silas stumbled in with a blast of frozen air. He was covered in snow ice crusting his eyebrows and beard, his face raw and red from the cold. And he was limping badly. "Silas!" She rushed to him, catching him as he swayed. "What happened?" "Horse spooked, through me." His words came through chattering teeth. "Legs hurt, not broken, but—" He winced as he tried to put weight on it. "Couldn't ride. Had to walk. In this storm. For how long? Couple hours. Maybe more. Lost track." Clara's blood ran cold. A couple of hours in this weather, injured on foot, it was a miracle he'd made it back at all. "Caleb!" Her voice was sharp, urgent. The boy jerked awake instantly. "Help me get your father to the fire. Wyatt, wake up. I need hot water and blankets. Move!" The boys scrambled to obey, their fear channeled into action. Together, Clara and Caleb managed to get Silas to the chair by the fireplace. His hands were like ice, his lips blue-tinged, his whole body shaking with cold that had seeped into his bones. "Need to warm you up," Clara said, pulling off his frozen coat, his gloves, his boots. "Slowly. Too fast could shock your system." "How do you know that?" Caleb asked, bringing armfuls of blankets. "Factory workers froze sometimes, in the bad winters. Learned what helped." She wrapped the blankets around Silas, tucking them tight. "Hot water, not boiling. Wyatt, where's that kettle?" They worked together, the three of them moving like a unit, warming Silas by degrees. His shaking gradually subsided, color returning to his face, his breathing evening out. "The cattle," he managed finally. "They're secured. But something spooked them. Something wasn't right." "What do you mean?" "Found tracks. Human tracks near the fence line. Fresh before the snow covered them." His eyes found hers, dark with meaning. "Someone was out there, Clara. Watching." The blood drained from her face. "Edmund. It had to be Edmund." "I'll check the property," Caleb said immediately. "Make sure nothing's been—" "No." Silas tried to stand, fell back with a grimace of pain. "Nobody goes outside, not tonight. We lock the doors, we watch, and we wait for morning." "Pa!" "That's an order, Caleb." The boy subsided, but his expression was mutinous. Clara checked Silas's leg, finding it swollen, but intact, a bad sprain, not a break. She bound it with strips of cloth, propped it on a stool, and made him drink hot tea until the shaking finally stopped. "You could have died out there," she said quietly, when Caleb and Wyatt had finally been convinced to return to bed. "You could have frozen to death trying to get home." "Had to get home." His hand found hers, cold fingers wrapping around her warm ones. "Had something worth getting home to." Tears pricked her eyes. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." "Can't promise that. Ranching's dangerous work." "Then promise me you'll try. Promise me you'll fight to come back no matter what." Silas lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "I promise. But Clara, if something happens, if I'm not here, don't. If I'm not here, you need to know. The children, they love you. This ranch, it could be yours. I've already talked to Josiah about the paperwork." "Silas, stop." She pulled her hand free, cupping his face between her palms. "Nothing is going to happen to you. We've survived too much to lose each other now." He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes soft in the firelight. When did this become more than practical? I don't know, but it did. Yeah. He covered her hands with his. It did. They stayed like that until exhaustion claimed them both. Clara's head resting on his shoulder, his arms wrapped around her, the fire burning down to embers around them. Morning came gray and bitter. Clara woke stiff and cold, still curled against Silas in the chair. The fire had died, and frost rimmed the windows. She extracted herself carefully, not wanting to wake him, and moved to stoke the flames back to life. That's when she smelled it. Smoke. Not wood smoke from the fireplace, but something sharper, more acrid. She ran to the window and looked out. The barn was on fire. Silas! Her scream tore through the house. Silas, wake up! The barn! Everything happened at once. Silas jerked awake, tried to stand, nearly collapsed from the pain in his leg. Caleb burst from his room, already pulling on boots. The younger children appeared in doorways, faces white with fear. The horses, Caleb was saying. Pa, the horses are in there. I know. Silas grabbed a coat, tried to move toward the door. Clara blocked his path. You can barely walk. I don't care. Those horses... I'll go. Caleb was already at the door. I'm faster. I'm not hurt. Nobody's going alone. Clara's voice was sharp, commanding. Caleb with me. Lottie, stay with your father and the little ones. Don't leave this house for any reason. She grabbed a coat, wrapped a scarf around her face, and followed Caleb into the inferno. The heat hit her first, even through the bitter cold. Flames licked up the barn walls, greedily consuming dry wood that had stood for decades. The sound was deafening, roaring fire, screaming horses, the crack and pop of exploding timber. The door. Caleb was already yanking at the main barn door, but it wouldn't budge. It's jammed or locked. Clara looked around desperately and spotted a side entrance partially blocked by drifted snow. There. Help me dig. They clawed through the snow with bare hands, the cold burning their skin as badly as the nearby flames. Finally, Clara was able to wrench the door open. Smoke billowed out, thick and choking. She pulled her scarf tighter over her nose and mouth. Stay low, she gasped. The horses are in the back stalls. They crawled through the smoke-filled barn, the heat intensifying with every inch. Clara's eyes streamed. Her lungs burned, but she kept moving. She could hear the horses now, 3 of them panicking in their stalls, unable to escape. Caleb reached the first stall, wrestling with the latch. It stuck. Clara grabbed a pitchfork from nearby, using it as a lever. The latch broke free, and the horse inside bolted past them, racing for the door they'd left open. 2 more stalls. Clara's arms screamed with effort as she broke the second latch. Another horse freed another panicked bolt toward safety. The 3rd stall, this was Storm Caleb's favorite, a gray mare who'd been the boy's constant companion for years. Storm, easy girl, easy. Caleb was trying to calm her, but the mare was wild with fear, rearing and kicking at the burning walls around her. A beam cracked overhead. Clara looked up and saw it splitting flames eating through its center, the whole thing starting to give way. Caleb, move! She threw herself at the boy, knocking him sideways as the beam came down. She felt a searing pain across her shoulder, smelled burning fabric, heard Caleb's scream mixing with her own. Then they were rolling, scrambling the mare. Storm racing past them as the 3rd stall collapsed behind her. Go! Clara shoved Caleb toward the door. Go, go, go! They ran, stumbling, falling, pushing through the smoke toward the rectangle of gray light that marked the exit. Clara's shoulder was on fire, literally on fire, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop, just kept moving until she burst into open air and collapsed into the snow. Caleb was beating at her shoulder, using handfuls of snow to extinguish the flames. Miss Clara, you're hurt. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. The pain was excruciating, but she was alive, and so was Caleb and the horses. She counted. 3 horses in the yard, trembling, but alive. "We got them all," she gasped. "We got them all." Behind them, the barn roof collapsed with a roar that shook the ground. Silas reached them seconds later, limping through the snow, his face ashen. "Clara, oh God, Clara! I'm all right. You're burned. I'm alive. The horses are alive. Caleb's alive." She let him pull her up, let him wrap his arm around her waist. That's what matters. They stood together watching the barn burn 4 months of hay and equipment and memories turning to ash. Behind them, Lottie had appeared with the younger children, all of them watching in horrified silence. "It was him," Caleb said suddenly. "It had to be. That man from Boston. He did this." "We don't know that," Silas started. "The door was locked from the outside, Pa. I couldn't open it because someone locked it. Someone wanted those horses to die. Someone wanted—" The boy's voice cracked. "Someone wanted us to die trying to save them." Clara's injured shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. But beneath the pain, a cold fury was building, the kind of fury she'd kept locked away for years, the kind that had helped her survive Edmund's advances and the factory's cruelty and every person who'd ever tried to break her. Where would he go? She asked. After something like this, where would he hide? Clara, no. Silas gripped her arm. He tried to kill your son, Silas. He tried to kill me. This ends today. You're hurt. I don't care. The words exploded out of her, surprising them both. I am done running from Edmund Hartley. I am done waiting for him to destroy everything I love. He wants me, then he can come and get me. But I won't stand here while he picks us off one by one. Della was crying, pressing against Lottie's side. Wyatt looked terrified. Even Caleb seemed shaken by the intensity of Clara's rage. But Silas was looking at her with something like recognition. The old Miller cabin, he said finally. It's been abandoned for years, but it's the only shelter within riding distance. If he's still in the area, that's where he'd be. Then that's where I'm going. Not alone. Silas, your leg. I said not alone. He turned to Caleb. Take the children inside. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but us. Pa, I want to come. I need you here, son. I need you to protect your siblings the way I taught you. Silas gripped the boy's shoulder. Can you do that? Caleb wanted to argue. Clara could see it in every line of his body, but he was his father's son, and he understood duty. Yes, sir. I can do that. Good boy. Silas turned to Clara. Let's end this. They rode through the smoldering ruins of the storm, 2 horses carrying 2 people who'd both lost too much to lose anything else. Clara's shoulder screamed with every step, but she held on, focused on the task ahead. The Miller cabin came into view after 20 minutes, a small, tilting structure that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind, but smoke rose from its chimney and a horse was tied outside. Edmund's horse. Silas pulled his rifle from its saddle holster. Stay behind me. They approached the cabin, carefully dismounting out of sight and covering the last distance on foot. Clara could see movement through the dirty window, a figure pacing, agitated. Silas kicked the door open. Edmund spun, his eyes widening with shock, then narrowing with fury. You should be dead. Both of you should be dead in a burning barn. Silas's voice was ice. Is that what you were hoping for? I don't know what you're... There's kerosene on your boots. Silas raised the rifle. Same kind we use to start fires. You want to tell me how that happened? Edmund's composure cracked completely. He looked between Silas and Clara, desperation replacing his usual smugness. You don't understand. She belongs to me. I invested in her. I gave her everything, and she... I gave you nothing but my labor. Clara interrupted, stepping past Silas into the cabin. I owed you nothing but my work, and I did that work for years. You're the one who decided you wanted more. You're the one who couldn't accept no for an answer. You were ungrateful. I was a person, a human being with the right to say no. She stood before him now, close enough to see the sweat on his brow, the fear in his eyes. You never saw that. You saw property, an investment. Something you could own because you had money and I didn't. That's how the world works. Not my world. Not anymore. Edmund lunged for her. He was faster than she expected, or maybe she was slower, weakened by injury and exhaustion. His hand closed around her burned shoulder, sending agony shooting through her body. She screamed, twisted, tried to break free. Then Silas was there, slamming Edmund against the wall, pressing the rifle barrel to his throat. "Give me a reason," Silas said quietly. "Give me one reason not to pull this trigger." Edmund's eyes bulged. "You wouldn't? You're not a murderer." "I'm a man who just watched someone try to burn my family alive. I'm a man whose wife died while he was helpless to save her. I'm a man with nothing left to lose except the woman standing behind me. You tried to take her. You tried to kill my son. You tell me what I wouldn't do to stop you." For the first time since she'd known him, Clara saw real fear in Edmund's eyes. "The deputy," he gasped. "The marshal. I'll confess. I'll tell them everything. Just don't, please." "Silas." Clara touched his arm. "Silas, look at me." He didn't move. "Silas, please. He's not worth becoming something you'll regret." Slowly, so slowly, the pressure eased. Silas stepped back, the rifle still raised, but no longer pressed against Edmund's throat. "You're going to walk out of this cabin," Silas said. "You're going to get on your horse, and you're going to ride straight to Bitter Creek. You're going to find Deputy Pike and confess to arson and attempted murder. And if you try to run, if I ever see your face again, I will kill you. No warnings, no trials, just a bullet in your head. Understand?" Edmund nodded frantically. "Then move." They escorted him back to town, Silas riding behind with the rifle, never wavering. Clara fighting to stay conscious as pain and exhaustion pulled at her. By the time they reached Bitter Creek, word of the barn fire had already spread. Deputy Pike was waiting. "Edmund Hartley," the deputy said, taking custody of the trembling man. "You're under arrest for arson, attempted murder, and probably a dozen other things I'll figure out once I start investigating. You have anything to say?" "I confess," Edmund whispered. "I confess to everything. Just keep him away from me." Pike looked at Silas, at the rifle still in his hands, at the cold fury in his eyes. "Probably wise," the deputy agreed. Clara watched as Edmund was led away, his elegant coat stained with soot and snow, his careful composure utterly destroyed. She'd been afraid of this man for years. She'd run across a continent to escape him. And now he looked like exactly what he was, a small, pathetic man whose only power came from money and intimidation, both of which had failed him here. "It's over," Silas said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "He's done, Clara. He can't hurt you anymore." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to let the relief wash through her, to finally release the fear she'd carried for so long. But all she could feel was the burning in her shoulder, and an exhaustion so deep it seemed to reach her bones. "Take me home," she said. "Please, Silas. Take me home." He wrapped his arm around her waist, taking her weight as her legs threatened to give out. "Home it is," he said. They rode back to the ranch as the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. The barn was gone, nothing left but smoldering ruins and the lingering smell of smoke. But the house still stood. The horses had survived, and 4 children were waiting on the porch, their faces lighting up as their father appeared over the ridge. "Pa, Miss Clara!" They ran toward the approaching horses, Caleb leading Wyatt close behind Lottie with Della in her arms. "Is it over?" Caleb asked. "Is he?" "It's over." Silas dismounted, pulling his son into a fierce embrace. "He's in custody. He'll never hurt anyone again." The other children swarmed around them, all talking at once, crying and laughing, and asking questions faster than anyone could answer. Clara slid from her horse, swaying with exhaustion, and found herself surrounded by small arms, Della clinging to her leg, Wyatt hugging her waist, Lottie pressing close to her uninjured side, and Caleb. Caleb stood before her, his eyes bright with tears he was trying not to shed. "You saved Storm," he said. "You ran into that fire and saved my horse. We did it together. You got burned. For me. For my stupid horse." Clara cupped his face in her hands. "Your horse isn't stupid. And there's nothing I wouldn't do for this family, Caleb. Nothing. Do you understand that now?" The boy who had watched her with suspicion for weeks, who had tested her and pushed her and waited for her to fail, that boy broke. He threw his arms around her and sobbed against her shoulder, finally letting go of all the grief and fear and desperate hope he'd been carrying. "I believe you," he whispered. "I believe you're staying." Clara held him tight, tears streaming down her own face, her burned shoulders screaming in protest. "I'm staying," she promised. "Forever. I'm never leaving any of you." Around them, the rest of the family gathered close, all of them touching, holding, reassuring themselves that everyone was alive, everyone was safe, everyone was home. The barn could be rebuilt. What mattered couldn't be burned. The days after Edmund's arrest passed in a blur of healing and rebuilding. Clara's shoulder burned with every movement, the skin raw and blistered where the beam had caught her. Dr. Morrison came out from town twice to change the bandages, warning her that she'd carry the scar for life. "Does that bother you?" Silas asked one evening, watching her wince as she tried to reach for a pot on the high shelf. "The scar?" Clara shook her head. "I've had worse marks left on me by the factory. At least this one means something. This one I earned protecting people I love." Silas crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, taking the pot down for her, but he didn't step away. He stood close, his hand coming up to brush a strand of hair from her face. "You keep saying things like that," he murmured. "Like what? Like you love us. Like this is where you belong." "Because it is. Because I do." He studied her face in the lamplight, his dark eyes searching. "Clara, I need to ask you something. And I need you to answer honest." Her heart stuttered. "All right." "When you stood on that auction platform in the church, when everyone was laughing and nobody wanted you, did you ever imagine ending up here in this kitchen with 4 children calling you theirs, with a man who can't stop thinking about you?" Clara's throat tightened. "No, I imagined survival. I imagined getting through another day, another week, another year. I didn't let myself imagine anything more than that. And now? Now I imagine mornings making breakfast while you drink your terrible coffee. I imagine watching these children grow up, teaching them everything I know. I imagine growing old in this house, being buried in this land." Her voice broke slightly. "I imagine a life I never thought I'd have. And it terrifies me, Silas, because I've learned that imagining things just makes it hurt more when they're taken away." "Nobody's taking anything." He cupped her face in his hands, calloused thumbs brushing her cheekbones. "I won't let them. You're mine, Clara. Mine and theirs and ours. And I'm asking not as an arrangement, not as a practical matter, I'm asking because I love you. Will you marry me properly forever?" The word caught in her throat. She'd dreamed of hearing it, hadn't let herself believe she ever would. "Yes." The word came out broken, tearful. "Yes, Silas. Yes." He kissed her, then really kissed her, the way she'd been wanting him to for weeks. His lips were warm and demanding and gentle all at once, and she melted into him. Her injured shoulder, forgotten, everything forgotten, except the feeling of finally being exactly where she belonged. "Pause kissing Miss Clara." They broke apart to find Wyatt standing in the doorway, his eyes wide as saucers. "I mean it," the boy continued loudly. "He's really kissing her. On the mouth. Caleb Lottie Pause kissing Miss Clara." Footsteps thundered through the house. Within seconds, all 4 children had assembled, staring at the adults with varying expressions of shock, delight, and embarrassed fascination. "It's about time," Caleb said, crossing his arms, but he was fighting a smile. "Does this mean she's going to be our real mama now?" Della asked, tugging at Lottie's sleeve. Lottie looked at Clara, something hopeful and vulnerable in her eyes. "Does it?" Clara looked at Silas, then at the children. These 4 young people who'd lost so much, fought so hard, and somehow found room in their hearts to let her in. "If you'll have me," she said softly, "I'd be honored to be your mama. For real. Forever." Della broke first, launching herself at Clara with the full force of a 4-year-old's enthusiasm. Wyatt followed, then Lottie, then surprisingly Caleb, who wrapped his arms around all of them in a hug that was more tackle than embrace. Silas stood watching, his eyes bright with tears. He wasn't bothering to hide. "Looks like it's settled then," he said roughly. "We're getting married." "When?" Wyatt demanded. "Tomorrow. Can it be tomorrow?" "Not tomorrow, son. We need time to plan, to do it proper." "How about New Year's Day?" Caleb suggested. "That way it's a fresh start. A new year, a new family." Clara looked at Silas. "New Year's Day. Works for me, if you're willing to have a short engagement." "I've waited 28 years to find a home," Clara said. "I don't want to wait a single day longer than I have to." The news spread through Bitter Creek like wildfire. By the next morning, Martha from the general store had arrived with fabric for a wedding dress, insisting it was a gift and refusing payment. The Reverend Tate came to discuss the ceremony, his wife bringing enough food to feed them for a week. Even Cordelia Blackwood sent a note, stiff and formal, but offering congratulations and a promise to attend. "Never thought I'd see the day Cordelia Blackwood was civil to me," Clara murmured, reading the note. "People change," Silas said. "Or maybe they just need to see someone stand up to them before they remember their manners. Or maybe she's just curious about the spectacle. Could be that too." He grinned, actually grinned, an expression Clara had rarely seen on his weathered face. "Let her be curious. We've got nothing to hide." The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Clara's shoulder healed enough that she could move without wincing, though Dr. Morrison warned her the scar would remain tight and sensitive for months. She didn't care. She had more important things to think about. Like the dress Martha was helping her sew, simple cream wool, warm enough for a winter wedding, elegant enough to make her feel like something more than the factory girl she'd been. Like the children who had taken to calling her Mama Clara, and then gradually just Mama. Like Silas, who looked at her every morning as if he still couldn't believe she was real. "Stop staring," she told him one afternoon, catching him watching her knead bread. "Can't help it. Spent 3 years looking at empty space. Now there's something worth looking at." "You're getting soft in your old age." "Maybe." He crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. "Or maybe I just finally have something to be soft about." She leaned back against him, flowery hands and all. "The children are watching. Let them. They should know what love looks like." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Is that what this is, love? You know it is." "I do, but I like hearing you say it." "Then I'll say it every day for the rest of our lives." He kissed her forehead, her nose, the corner of her mouth. "I love you, Clara May Whitfield, soon to be Clara May Brody. And I thank God every day that I walked into that church and saw you standing there." "You almost didn't come in, did you?" Silas paused, surprised. "How'd you know that?" "Caleb told me. Said you almost turned around at the door. Said you weren't sure you were ready." "I wasn't sure. Felt like I was betraying Josie somehow. Looking for someone new when she'd only been gone 3 years. He was quiet for a moment. "But then I saw you, standing up there chin high, telling the whole room what you were worth, even though nobody believed you. And I thought there's someone who understands loss, someone who knows how to survive. And now I think you were always meant to be here, like the universe was just waiting for us to find each other." He pulled her closer. "I don't believe in fate usually, but with you, I'm starting to reconsider." New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear. The ranch had been transformed. Neighbors had helped rebuild a temporary shelter for the horses. The house had been cleaned and decorated with winter greens and the few flowers that could be found. A feast was being prepared in the kitchen, multiple families contributing dishes until the table groaned with more food than Clara had ever seen in one place. Clara stood in her small room, looking at herself in the cracked mirror, wearing the dress that Martha had helped her create. The cream wool fell in soft folds, modest but beautiful. Lottie had woven a crown of dried flowers for her hair. Even the scar on her shoulder, barely hidden by the dress's neckline, seemed less like a mark of pain and more like a badge of honor. A knock on the door. "Mama, can I come in?" It was Lottie holding something in her hands. "Of course, sweetheart." The girl entered, her expression nervous. "I wanted to give you something. Before the wedding." She held out a small leather-bound book, Josie's recipe journal, the one they'd found that first morning when Clara taught Grace to make pie. "This was Mama's," Lottie said. "Her mama gave it to her when she got married, and her mama's mama gave it to her. It's supposed to pass to the bride." She swallowed hard. "I talked to Pa. He said it was my choice. And I choose to give it to you, because you're my mama now, and I want you to have it." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "Lottie, I can't, this is too precious." "That's why you should have it." Lottie pressed the book into Clara's hands. "Because you'll take care of it, because you understand what it means." The girl hesitated, then threw her arms around Clara. "I'm glad you came. I'm glad Pa chose you. I'm glad you're our mama." Clara held her tight, this daughter of her heart, if not her blood. "I'm glad too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know." Lottie pulled back, wiping her eyes. "We should go. Everyone's waiting." The ceremony was held in the main room of the ranch house, too cold outside for anyone to stand comfortably in the snow. Reverend Tate stood before the fireplace, his wife at the small piano that had somehow been transported from town. Neighbors filled every available space, crowding together with the warmth of community that Clara had never experienced before. But she only saw Silas. He stood at the front, wearing his best clothes, clean, but worn, practical but dignified. Caleb stood beside him, serving as best man, his young face solemn with the weight of the moment. The other children sat in the front row, Wyatt bouncing with excitement, Lottie clutching the recipe book to her chest, Della holding Sonny and whispering explanations of everything happening. Clara walked toward them step by step, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. When she reached Silas, he took her hands in his. His palms were warm, calloused, steady. "You're beautiful," he murmured low enough that only she could hear. "You're biased." "Absolutely. Doesn't make it less true." Reverend Tate cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Silas Nathaniel Brody and Clara May Whitfield in holy matrimony." The words washed over Clara, traditional phrases she'd heard at other weddings, never imagining she'd hear them at her own. But she barely registered them. She was too busy looking at Silas, at the way his eyes never left her face, at the slight tremble in his hands that told her he was as overwhelmed as she was. "The couple has chosen to write their own vows," Reverend Tate continued. "Silas, you may begin." Silas squeezed her hands, took a deep breath. "Clara, 3 months ago, I walked into a church expecting to do my duty, to find someone practical who could help with my children and my home. I wasn't looking for love. I wasn't sure I believed in it anymore." His voice roughened. "But then I saw you, standing there, chin up, telling the world exactly who you were, even though no one wanted to hear it. And I thought, there's a woman who doesn't quit. There's a woman who fights for what matters. There's a woman I could spend my life beside." I wasn't wrong. You've proven yourself in ways I couldn't have imagined. You've won over my children, stood up to people who tried to destroy you, and walked into a burning building to save what I loved. But more than that, you've made me believe again. In hope. In second chances. In the possibility that life could be more than just survival. I promise to love you, Clara. To protect you, to stand beside you, to be your partner in everything. Not because I have to, because I want to. Because you're the best thing that ever walked into my life, and I thank God every day that I was wise enough to step forward and claim you. Clara was crying now, tears streaming down her face. She'd sworn she wouldn't cry, but the vows she'd prepared scattered like leaves in her mind. "Your turn, Miss Whitfield," Reverend Tate said gently. She took a shuddering breath. "Silas, when I stood in that church waiting to see if anyone would want me, I wasn't hoping for love. I wasn't hoping for family. I was hoping for survival, a roof over my head, food in my belly, work to fill my days. That's all I thought I was worth. You proved me wrong. Not just by stepping forward, anyone could have done that, but by seeing me. Really seeing me. Not as the leftover bride, not as the factory girl, not as the woman no one wanted. You saw someone worth choosing, worth defending, worth loving. Your children taught me what it means to be family. Your home taught me what it means to belong. And you—" Her voice broke. "You taught me that it's never too late to start over. That wounds can heal. That love is worth the risk, even when you've been hurt before. I promise to love you, Silas. To be a mother to your children, a partner in your work, a companion in your days. I promise to never quit on this family, no matter how hard things get. Because you didn't quit on me when everyone else did. And that's a debt I'll spend the rest of my life repaying." Silas lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "No debt," he murmured. "Just love." Reverend Tate was smiling. "By the power vested in me by God and the Montana Territory, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Silas, you may kiss your bride." Silas didn't need to be told twice. He pulled Clara into his arms and kissed her, really kissed her in front of God and their children and half of Bitter Creek. The room erupted in cheers, but Clara barely heard them. She was too busy kissing her husband, tasting salt on his lips that might have been her tears, or his feeling the solid warmth of him against her. They were married. She had a family. She had a home. She had everything she'd never dared to dream. The celebration lasted well into the evening. Food was eaten, toasts were made, the children ran wild with other children until they collapsed in exhausted heaps. Clara danced with Silas, then with Caleb, then with Wyatt, then with anyone who asked. Her feet ached and her shoulder burned, and she'd never been happier in her entire life. Near midnight, she slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The cold hit her immediately sharp and clean, but she welcomed it. She needed a moment to breathe, to process everything that had happened. The door opened behind her. "You'll freeze out here." Silas wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pulled her close against him. They stood together looking at the stars, brilliant pinpricks of light scattered across the vast Montana sky. "Josie used to do this," Silas said quietly. "Stand outside at night, looking at the stars. She said they reminded her how small our problems really are, how the universe keeps spinning no matter what happens to us. Do you think she'd approve of me? I know she would." His arm tightened around her. "She'd love you, Clara. For your strength, your stubbornness, the way you love our children. She'd be grateful I found someone worthy. I hope I can live up to her memory." "You already have. Not by replacing her, nobody could do that, but by building something new alongside what she created." He turned her to face him. "The children told me something today. They said they've decided to call you Mama, full-time. Not Miss Clara, not Mama Clara. Just Mama. Is that all right with you?" Fresh tears sprang to Clara's eyes. "It's more than all right. It's everything." "Good. Because those 4 kids in there, they've chosen you just as much as I have. You're ours now, Clara Brody. For better or worse, richer or poorer, sickness and health. Ours. And you're mine," she whispered. "All of you. Forever." Inside, she could hear the party, continuing laughter and music, and the sounds of community. Outside, the Montana winter stretched vast and cold around them, but Clara felt nothing but warmth. She'd come to this territory with 17 cents in her pocket, and nothing but desperation in her heart. She'd stood on an auction platform while people laughed at her worth. She'd been the bride nobody wanted, the leftover, the last resort. But one man had seen different. One choice had defied everyone. And from that single moment of courage, his and hers, an entire life had grown. a husband who loved her, children who needed her, a home that finally felt like home. "Ready to go back in?" Silas asked. Clara looked at the house, at the light spilling from windows, at the shadows of people dancing, at the family waiting for them inside. "Yes," she said. "I'm ready." They walked back together, hand in hand, into the warmth and light. The years that followed would bring challenges. Harsh winters, difficult births, economic struggles. The children would grow and change and test her in ways she couldn't imagine. Silas would frustrate her and worry her and make her laugh until her sides ached. There would be grief and joy and everything in between. But through it all, one truth remained constant. Clara May Brody was exactly where she belonged. She was worth choosing. She was worth loving. She had always been worth everything. And finally, beautifully, she believed it.